This is Land of Fabula, 2 Chronicles 22. After 8 miserable years, Jehoram died. He was 7th in the Davidic line. Now, verse 1. The inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, his youngest son, king in his place, because the band of men who came with the Arabians to the camp had slain all the oldest. So Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, reigned. Ahaziah was 42 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri. Comment: verses 1 and 2 are reminders of the last chapter that Arabians and Philistines raided Judah. In verse 1, they came to the camp and killed all the older sons of the king, probably meaning they came to the Judean army camp. The royal males were with the army, and they got killed. Then the raiders broke into Jerusalem and killed the king's wives, but Athaliah, the king's wife, and her son Ahaziah escaped. He was the only son of the king that did escape. In verse 2, Ahaziah began to reign at the age of 42. But this must be a misprint in the manuscript, because that would make him older than his father. 2 Kings 8:26 clears it up that he was 22, not 42, when he took the throne. On his mother's side, he's a grandson of Ahab, king of Israel. In verse 2, his mother was daughter of Omri, it says, but this should be translated granddaughter, 2 Kings 8:18. In Hebrew, ben means male descendant and bath means female descendant, but too often they're translated as son or daughter without taking the context into account. Clearly, by context, she's Omri's granddaughter and Ahab's daughter. But no need for confusion. The point is that Ahaziah's mother's from the royal family of Israel, which was exceedingly evil. Quote, "There was no one like Ahab, who sold himself to do that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up." 1 Kings 21:25. Athaliah will prove to be a supervillain on par with her parents. Speaking of her son, the new young king Ahaziah, verse 3, he also walked in the ways of Ahab's house, because his mother was his counselor and acting wickedly. Comment in verse 3, speaking of Jezebel stirring up Ahab, Ahaziah's mother stirred him up, quote, his mother was his counselor and acting wickedly, end quote. So although Ahaziah's male line is the house of David, spiritually he's the house of Ahab. Verse 4, he did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, as did Ahab's house, for they were his counselors after the death of his father, to his destruction. Comment, he's getting counsel from his mother and her relatives in Israel. We don't find out just how bad things are in Jerusalem for a couple more chapters, 2 Chronicles 24:7. A temple to Baal has been built in Jerusalem, 2 Kings 11:18. Previously, Athaliah's male offspring, before they died in the raid, quote, had broken up God's house, and they also gave all the dedicated things of Yahweh's house to the Baals, 2 Kings 24:7. In other words, Athaliah's sons, before they were killed, and maybe your grandsons also, closed operations at the house of Yahweh, as will become clear, and built a house to Baal in Jerusalem. Furthermore, they transferred all the holy items dedicated to Yahweh from Yahweh's temple to Baal's temple. But Yahweh's still on his throne in heaven. He remains unshaken. He always has some people left, and he always finds a way to redeem their situation. Speaking of Ahaziah and his mother's side of the family, verse 5, he also followed their counsel and went with Jehoram the son of Ahab, king of Israel, to war against Hazael, king of Syria, at Ramoth-Gilead, and the Syrians wounded Joram. Comment, verse 5, King Ahab of Israel has passed away, and his son Jehoram is on Israel's throne. He's Ahaziah's uncle, not to be confused with Ahaziah's deceased father by the same name, who is king of Judah. In verse 5, it's deja vu all over again that Ahaziah went to war to support his uncle at Ramoth-Gilead, just like his grandfather went to war to support Ahab at the same place. And once again the king of Israel was wounded, but the king of Judah escaped without injury. In other words, Ahaziah is okay, but his uncle Jehoram was wounded. Coming up, the uncle will go back to his palace in Jezreel to recuperate. Verse 6, he returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which they had given him at Ramah when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. Azariah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Jehoram, the son of Ahab, and Jezreel because he was sick. Comment, it says Azariah, but it's a manuscript copy error. It should be Ahaziah. This should encourage us because even to the scribes, the names of these kings were confusing. He went to visit his wounded uncle in Jezreel. Coming up, Joram is a variant spelling of Jehoram. It's his uncle, and after just 1 year on the throne, Yahweh's already reaching out to destroy Ahaziah. Verse 7. Now the destruction of Ahaziah was of God, in that he went to Joram, for when he had come, he went out with Jehoram against Jehu the son of Nimshi, whom Yahweh had anointed to cut off Ahab's house. When Jehu was executing judgment on Ahab's house, he found the princes of Judah and the sons of the brothers of Ahaziah serving Ahaziah, and killed them. He sought Ahaziah, and they caught him. Now he was hiding in Samaria, and they brought him to Jehu and killed him, and they buried him, for they said, "He's the son of Jehoshaphat, who sought Yahweh with all his heart." The house of Ahaziah had no power to hold the kingdom. Comment, 2 Kings chapter 9 gives much more information. God raised up an army officer in Israel named Jehu and commanded him to annihilate the house of Ahab. Jehu did a thorough job of it. He rode into Jezreel, killed Uncle Jehoram, and tried to kill Ahaziah, who was visiting, but Ahaziah escaped and raced down the road in the direction of Judah. Jehu's men caught up with him and wounded him, but Ahaziah escaped again and made his way to Megiddo of Israel. He hid himself there, and from the sounds of it in 2 Kings, he died there of his wounds in hiding. But from the sound of it in verse 9 we just read, Jehu's men discovered him in hiding, brought him to Jehu, and they executed him. Jehu allowed some royal servants of Judah to come up and take away Ahaziah's body. They transported him to Jerusalem and put him in a tomb there. He was king for 1 year, and Yahweh cut him off like he cut off his father after 8 years. But about his male relatives, his brothers were all dead from the Arabian and Philistine raid, but he had 42 nephews. The nephews were completely unaware of Jehu's rampage in Israel. They were coming up the road from Judah in a festive mood on their way to visit the royals of Israel, when Jehu discovered them on the road and killed them. So in fulfillment of what Yahweh had commanded him, Jehu was able to make a clean sweep of the house of Ahab, whether they were residents of Israel or of Judah. Coming up back in Jerusalem, when Athaliah heard her young puppet son, King Ahaziah, was dead, verse 10. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal offspring of the house of Judah. Comment, she killed all the remaining royal offspring of Judah. She's been inserting herself behind the throne of Judah for 2 generations, and now she's taking the throne for herself. Obviously, the power structure in Jerusalem was accustomed to taking orders from her by this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to kill all the royal males. This left her completely in charge, she thought, but coming up, she didn't figure Yahweh into the picture. Verse 11. But Jehoshabeath, the king's daughter, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stealthily rescued him from among the king's sons who were slain, and put him and his nurse in the bedroom. Comment, amazingly in verse 11, in Athaliah's massacre of the royal males, she was trying to kill even her own grandsons. She didn't want them to grow up and take her power away. However, one of the royal women hid one of the boys and kept his existence a secret. Quote, she stealthily rescued him, end quote. He was 1-year-old Joash, son of Ahaziah, of the line of David. Verse 11. So Jehoshabeath, the daughter of King Jehoram, the wife of Jehoiada the priest, for she was the sister of Ahaziah, hid him from Athaliah so that she didn't kill him. He was with them hidden in God's house 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. Comment, in verse 11, the heroine was sister of Ahaziah, which makes her aunt of the little boy. But since the kings had multiple wives, she probably was not the daughter of Athaliah. At least she didn't act like Athaliah. In verse 11, it turns out that by marriage she's the wife of Jehoiada the high priest. In verse 12, where did they hide the boy? In the abandoned, non-functional, and broken-up house of Yahweh, the one place in which Athaliah had the least interest. In verse 12, they hid the boy there for 6 years under the direction of Jehoiada the priest. We find out in the next chapter the boy was in the temple from ages of 1 to 7. In the meantime, in verse 12, quote, Athaliah reigned over the land. That must have been a long 6 years. 2 Chronicles 23 is next.